I have this thing where I assume other people know something I don't. And this is not with everybody. But if somebody appears to be doing better than me in an area where I'm struggling, I immediately assume that they have found the secret thing, whether it's the secret website, the hidden book, the special spreadsheet, the whisperer, some entrance to the answer that everybody else apparently knows about except me. And I caught myself doing this a few times. The first time was with therapy. I was in a group where someone was talking about her therapy journey, how much she loved her therapist, and all the things she had been able to surface and heal through. And it was all because of that therapist relationship. And at the time, I was still struggling to find a therapist who worked for me. So when it came time to ask questions, I was very quick to ask, where did you find your therapist? Because I thought she must have a better way of finding therapists than I do. She knows something that I don't, okay? She must have a website, a referral network, a private list being passed around, something. What did Issa Rae say? They're having secret white people meetings. That is how I felt. So I asked her, how did you find your therapist? And she gave me two answers. She said, go to Psychology Today or therapy for Black girls, then filter based on your insurance, your location, and whatever you need help with. And I was like, okay, thank you. And I was grateful. I was. She took the time to answer my question. But I sat there thinking, I have written several articles explaining how to find a therapist. At that point, I was writing on Medium and I had published articles on articles giving people this exact advice that she just gave me and even more detail. And this was because I have a background in social work. I was a licensed social worker and I've also been in therapy for quite some time. So I knew the directories, I knew how to filter, I knew that finding the right therapist might require trying more than one person. I knew all of this. And still, I had asked the question because I assumed her answer would be more valuable than mine. And I was like, okay, interesting. Then a little while later, I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see a carousel with baking with a professional baker. They're giving you some tips on baking. Now I dabble in baking. I like to do my little 1 2 1 2. I know my way around some butter, some flour, some sugar, And I love me a questionable experiment or two, okay? So, of course, I stopped scrolling because I want to learn more. So, she starts explaining why powdered ingredients can sometimes be easier to use in baking than liquid ones. Cool. For example, coffee can deepen the chocolate flavor in cake or cookies, right? And I love a chocolate chip cookie, so a little scoop of coffee goes a long way. But brewed coffee adds liquid, which can change the recipe and the texture of the cookie that you're making. However, espresso powder gives you that flavor without forcing you to rebalance as much of the chemistry. I know this. I've been baking for some time. I am also an African woman. We have been using powdered milk for millennia. Okay. And I see the posts about using powdered milk instead of liquid milk. And I'm just like, still scrolling, waiting for this magic slide. And I'm thinking, okay, yes, yes, yes. Tell me what the real bakers are buying. Like, I understand the thing you're saying, but I want to know the elite brand, the French butter of it all. Because maybe I have the wrong version. Because I've been known to use American butter. Maybe I've been using the powdered milk for civilians. I don't know. So I keep scrolling. I get to the end and I see that I use these brands. We use the same brands. And the brands that were different, I had already tried and I just liked mine better. So I thought back with the example of therapy I shared, where I assumed somebody else had found a secret resource and she pointed me toward the same websites I had recommended to other people. With baking, I assumed this person knew about better ingredients, and those ingredients were already sitting in my kitchen. So I had to ask myself, why does information feel more valuable to me when it comes from somebody else? What magical thing do I think they have that I don't? And if you've ever looked at somebody else's career and assumed they had access to a door, a pathway, a person you couldn't see or access, stay with me because this is exactly why pivoting can feel like starting from scratch. The easy conclusion from these two stories would be A4, trust yourself. You already have the answers. And that's part of it. It's part of it. It's true, but it's kind of useless if we just keep that alone. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that trust yourself was not the entire lesson. Because knowing about psychology today did not immediately find me the right therapist. I still had to use it. I had to use the knowledge. And then use it again. And then use it again. It took me at least 3 tries to find a therapist who worked for me. But every attempt taught me something, right? The more I used these websites and went through the process, the more precise I became about what I actually was struggling with. I learned which therapeutic approaches worked for me and which ones didn't. And also, therapy is very nuanced. So I learned about the different ways that people talk to me. I learned about the different cultures that understand my culture, which is a big part of why I'm in therapy, right? I learned what kinds of questions I wanted a therapist to ask and what I should ask a therapist. I learned what I needed to feel safe enough to open up. And I developed better language to describe what I was looking for over time. And eventually, I emailed another therapist and said, essentially, these are the things I'm struggling with, and this is what I need help with. Is this something you can help me with? And she responded, I'm not the right person for you, but I know someone who would be perfect. And she was right. That referral is how I found the therapist who I'm currently working with. And of course, perfect does not mean flawless. A therapist is still another human being. However, she is the right fit for me in this moment of my life. And I'm really grateful that I found her in the way that I did. Because the funny thing is, I did eventually find the back door I had been looking for. When I initially asked that question, I was expecting to be given some magical back door. I was expected to be given, well, this person is the perfect person. And that's not how that works. But by going through the front door and doing the work, I got the private referral. I got the person saying, I know exactly what you need. But the back door only opened because I kept walking through the same front door everybody else was using. And I had to go through the directories. I had to try more than one therapist. I had to learn what did not work. I had to develop better judgment. And after putting in those reps, I could finally articulate what I needed clearly enough for somebody else to recognize that right fit. The front door produced the back door. And that made me think about one of the biggest fears people have when they're trying to pivot. What if I have to start from scratch? I don't think most people are actually starting from scratch. I think many people are standing at a familiar front door, assuming everybody on the other side entered through the same secret passage, right? Or everybody's maybe standing at the fork of the road and we're beating ourselves up because we think the people we see thriving ahead of us knew which path to pick to begin with. And I don't think that's always true. You look at somebody who successfully pivoted into a new industry and you think, who did she know? What did she know? How did she know to pick this pathway? You see someone got hired and think there must be a secret job board. You see somebody move into a role you didn't know even existed and you assume they had a perfect plan from the beginning. And sometimes they did have access that you did not. I'm not going to pretend that everybody starts in the same place. Some people are absolutely born closer to that access, that back door. Networks matter, money matters, location matters, privilege matters. But, and yet still, sometimes what looks like secret access from the outside is accumulated specificity. It is someone learning from what happens and returning with a better question and returning with evidence. They tested what they thought they wanted. They paid attention to what worked and what didn't. They built relationships. They developed better language. And eventually, someone could hear that language and say, "Oh, I know exactly where you belong." And that is what putting in the reps gives you. It gives you judgment, and judgment changes what you can see. A job board may be available to everybody, but after you've had 5 conversations with people in the industry, you search the job board differently. LinkedIn may be available to everybody, but after you understand which problems a particular team is trying to solve, you contact different people and ask better questions, or you are able to just pitch yourself better. And therefore, out of the 50 emails that person received, yours stands out because you get it. And you only get it because you walk through that initial front door. A project inside your company may have been visible the entire time, but after you understand the skill you're trying to build, you recognize it as an opportunity, right? The resources did not necessarily change. Your ability to leverage it changed. And that is how my own pivots worked. I've pivoted 5 times in my career. I did not begin with the perfect language for the next job. In fact, I stumbled in a lot of interviews. but I had experience, but I had experience, but I did not always know what another industry called that experience. However, the conversations gave me language through informational interviews. The experiments, quite frankly, of going on interviews gave me evidence. And that combination helped other people recognize where I could fit because they started giving me feedback. They started seeing my work. So if you're trying to pivot, you may already have enough to start. You're probably further ahead than you think. I am not saying that you have everything you will ever need, but I am saying you may have enough to start. You have to ask the questions, do the informational interviews, put in the reps. If there's a project inside your company that interests you, talk to the person doing it. Ask what skill the project requires. Ask what good looks like. Ask how they got involved. Ask whether there's a small piece you can support. Getting through this way and then figure out the rest. Use the ordinary resource. Then pay attention to what it teaches you. Because for a long time, I gathered and hoarded information because I assumed everybody else knew something I didn't. I kept thinking if I figured it out, if I kept accumulating information, then I would find the perfect answer. But it took me so long, and that's why I'm making this video. You have to just do it. You have to do it. You have to get a little bit of information, then do something. And that is walking through the front doors, testing what you think you want. It's noticing what does not fit and returning with better questions. And if you keep asking questions without testing anything, you're not necessarily gaining clarity. It's actually a bit of a brain fog. Sometimes you're just collecting more answers that you do not trust yourself enough to use. And that's unfair and very unkind to you. Okay. So before you go looking for another secret website, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what front door do I already have access to? Is it LinkedIn, a professional group, a project inside your company, a former colleague, a course you already paid for but have not actually used? Okay, I'm looking at you. And that all falls under what front door do I already have access to? The second question is, what have my previous attempts already taught me? This is going beyond what failed. It also is what became clearer because I failed. And the third one is, what can I articulate now that I could not articulate the first time? Because you may not be starting from scratch, but you may be returning with better judgment, and that's worth its weight in gold. Many of us dismiss ordinary publicly available resources because we mistake familiarity for uselessness. But the leverage comes from returning with better questions, stronger criteria, and more specific language. So tell me in the comments, what familiar resource have you been dismissing, and how could you use it differently now that you better understand what you are actually looking for? And if you're trying to figure out which career direction is worth testing, watch my Where Do I Fit video next. That is where I show you how I found career paths my original search bar could not name. And then watch the spider drop experiment, where I show you how to test one of those paths without immediately quitting your job and getting in crisis mode.